Two brothers, one road trip, one unexplained tragedy. In 1997, Nathan Reed and Dylan McCarthy thought getting their car unstuck was just a minor setback on their adventure. But what happened next on that Arizona road would become one of the most puzzling unsolved cases investigators have ever encountered. 27 years later, their family still doesn't have answers. The mystery continues, and someone out there knows the truth. It's difficult to understand how something like this could happen to anyone, but if it happened to Nathan and Dylan, it could happen to anyone. What these two brothers encountered in the remote wilderness of Arizona was something truly sinister and unexplainable. On Friday morning, March 20th, 1997, 29-year-old Dylan McCarthy was preparing for a life-changing adventure. The Cleveland, Ohio native had recently accepted a job at the Montecito Sequoia Lodge in California's Sequoia National Park, and he was packing everything he owned into his black Ford Escape for the cross-country journey. Dylan's older brother, 39-year-old Nathan Reed, had offered to make the drive with him. Nathan wanted to experience America's landscapes with his younger brother, and their father had always taught them never to travel alone on long journeys through unfamiliar territory. As the SUV pulled out of the driveway that Friday morning, Nathan waved goodbye to his wife, Victoria Hayes, and their 5 young sons, expecting to return home in just a few days. Victoria watched from the doorway, completely unaware this would be the last time she'd ever see her husband alive. But you need to understand who Nathan Reed really was, because his character is crucial to understanding why this case has haunted investigators for nearly 3 decades. Nathan wasn't just any ordinary husband and father. He was methodical, careful to the point of obsession, and always thinking several steps ahead. He spent weekends restoring vintage cars, teaching his sons about mechanics, and never missing important moments in their lives. Victoria often said Nathan had this remarkable ability to make everyone feel completely safe and protected. Nathan and Victoria had met in high school and maintained an unbreakable connection through college and 10 years of dating before marriage. Family was everything to them. By 1997, their 5 boys filled their Cleveland home with energy and laughter. Nathan loved being a father and approached parenting with the same methodical care he brought to everything else. Dylan McCarthy was 10 years younger than Nathan, but the brothers maintained an incredibly close bond. Dylan was loyal to a fault, the kind of person who would help anyone who needed assistance, regardless of the cost to himself. He had a smile that could light up any room and possessed the same quick wit as his older brother. Dylan had been working as a maintenance supervisor in Cleveland but felt ready for change. When a friend told him about opportunities at the California Lodge, Dylan applied immediately. When he got the job, he called Nathan to share the news. Nathan was genuinely excited for his brother's opportunity. As he told Victoria, "If Dylan doesn't take this chance now, he'll always regret it. He's young and free. This is the perfect time for such a move." Victoria could see Nathan wanted to join the trip before he even said it. "You want to go with him, don't you?" she asked. Nathan nodded, explaining their father's advice about traveling together. Victoria immediately encouraged him to go. But here's what makes this story so disturbing. Nathan was obsessively careful about communication with his family whenever he traveled. Victoria never worried when Nathan was away, because he religiously checked in, shared his location, updated her on plan changes, and never missed his nightly call to say goodnight to his sons. This wasn't casual. It was a sacred commitment that was completely unbreakable under normal circumstances. This detail becomes absolutely crucial to understanding how wrong everything went. The journey from Cleveland to California would cover 2,400 miles over 4 days. The brothers planned to leave Friday, March 20th in Dylan's Ford Escape, with Nathan flying home the following Tuesday. Their timeline was flexible to allow for sightseeing stops along Route 66, including the famous Blue Hole in New Mexico and Spider Rock Campground in Arizona's Canyon de Chelly National Monument. Reaching these remote destinations required significant detours from major highways into sparsely populated areas where cell service was unreliable. Nathan and Dylan believed they were prepared with 2 GPS devices, supplies, and each other. The first day exceeded expectations. Both brothers were so excited they drove all the way to Texas instead of stopping in Oklahoma as planned. Nathan's final video call with Victoria came late Friday night from the Shamrock Inn in Shamrock, Texas. Victoria remembers this conversation with crystal clarity. It would be the last time she'd see her husband's face. Both brothers looked tired, but were clearly having the time of their lives. They didn't talk long because it was past 11:30 p.m. Ohio time. "Get some good sleep," Victoria told them. "I love you both. Drive safely tomorrow and keep me updated." Those were the last words Victoria would ever speak to her husband. Saturday morning, March 21st, Nathan and Dylan were back on the road early, eager to reach Spider Rock Campground before sunset. Here's where the timeline becomes crucial. Nathan had always been exceptionally reliable about staying in constant communication during travel. Victoria never worried because she knew Nathan would send regular texts, share photos, and always call to say goodnight to his sons. Throughout Saturday morning and early afternoon, Victoria received exactly the communication she expected: photos of roadside attractions, text updates about their progress, and messages designed to make her and the boys feel included in their adventure. Victoria's final communication with Nathan came as a photograph during the late afternoon of Saturday, March 21st. The image showed both brothers standing together next to their Ford Escape at a scenic overlook, both smiling broadly, completely unaware they were already in terrible danger and that this would be the last image of them alive. But here's what makes Victoria's instincts so remarkably prescient. At approximately 8:30 p.m. on Saturday evening, while putting her 5 sons to bed, Victoria was suddenly struck by an overwhelming feeling that something was catastrophically wrong. It had been 4 hours since Nathan's final photograph, and in all their years of marriage, Nathan had never once missed calling to say goodnight to his sons. Not during blizzards, mechanical breakdowns, or even when he'd been hospitalized with food poisoning in 1994. Victoria tried dismissing her concerns, telling herself Nathan was probably driving a challenging stretch of road. But as the evening grew later and her phone remained silent, her fears became impossible to ignore. At 11:30 p.m., Victoria began a sleepless night of texting and calling both brothers. Neither answered, and both calls went to voicemail, highly unusual since both men kept their phones charged during travel. Victoria tried repeatedly throughout the night, growing more panicked with each unanswered call. Her nursing training kicked in, and she began thinking systematically about possible explanations, ranging from mechanical problems to medical emergencies. By Sunday morning, Victoria was in full crisis mode, methodically calling hospitals, hotels, campgrounds, and emergency services in areas where Nathan and Dylan should have been traveling. She spoke with dozens of people, describing her husband and brother-in-law, providing vehicle information, and begging for help understanding what might have happened. No one had seen Nathan and Dylan. No hospital had records of treating patients matching their descriptions. No hotel or campground had records of them checking in. It was as if the brothers had vanished without leaving any trace. As Sunday evening approached without word from either brother, Victoria knew with absolute certainty that something catastrophic had happened. At exactly 8:30 p.m. on Sunday, March 22nd, there was a firm knock at Victoria's door that sent waves of dread through her body. She walked to the door, somehow already knowing what she was about to hear. "Ma'am," the police officer began. "You're here about my husband, aren't you?" Victoria interrupted. "Yes, ma'am, I'm very sorry." The officer explained that Arizona law enforcement had contacted Cleveland police. Nathan had been found deceased on a remote road called the Apache Trail in Arizona's wilderness. Victoria's mind reeled with confusion. She'd never heard of the Apache Trail, and it wasn't part of their planned routes. How had Nathan and Dylan ended up there? When you hear that your husband has died, rational thinking becomes impossible. Even though part of Victoria had sensed this news was coming, she kept hoping the officer would say Nathan was injured somewhere and needed her. Now here's where this story transforms from tragic accident into one of the most baffling unsolved mysteries in American law enforcement history. Deputy Roscoe Herrera of the Apache County Sheriff's Office received the emergency call at exactly 5:30 p.m. on Sunday, March 22nd. A local Navajo Nation resident cutting firewood was heading back toward the village of Sawmill when he discovered a scene that would be permanently burned into his memory. Two men were lying deceased along an extremely remote, unpaved stretch of Navajo Route 7, just miles west of Sawmill, Arizona. Both had suffered fatal injuries under violent circumstances, and an abandoned SUV with Ohio plates was discovered half a mile away. Navajo Nation police responded first, confirmed the victims' identities as Nathan Reed and Dylan McCarthy, then contacted the sheriff's office and FBI, knowing federal involvement would be required due to jurisdictional complexities on tribal land. Deputy Herrera arrived at 8:25 p.m. as darkness fell across the high desert landscape. His priority was securing the area, but the remote location and muddy conditions made evidence collection extraordinarily challenging. "I decided to wait until daylight to properly collect evidence," Deputy Herrera explained. "The scene needed absolute precision, and we couldn't risk missing crucial details in darkness." Sam Davenport, an FBI supervisory special agent covering northeastern Arizona, joined as lead federal investigator. The Navajo Nation operates as sovereign territory, so crimes involving tribal and non-tribal elements require immediate federal oversight. Agent Davenport and the FBI began working with Navajo police and sheriff's deputies to answer three fundamental questions. How did Nathan and Dylan end up on that remote road that wasn't part of their planned route? What happened during their final hours? And who was responsible? Agent Davenport has visited the crime scene multiple times. His description helps explain why this case became so complicated. Sawmill is very small, only 706 people in 1997, one gas station convenience store. Once you leave town limits, you're completely isolated in dense forest with no human habitation for miles. The area is characterized by high elevation, thick pine forests, and extreme susceptibility to sudden weather changes, including snow, rain, and flash flooding that can make roads impassable without warning to unfamiliar travelers. By Monday morning, March 23rd, multiple agencies were investigating, and what they discovered about Nathan and Dylan's final hours raised more questions than answers. The brothers' Ford Escape was found half a mile west of their bodies, completely stuck in thick mud on the unpaved portion of Navajo Route 7. This road is paved through Sawmill, then becomes challenging dirt road winding through forest toward Chinle, where visitors access Canyon de Chelly National Monument. You'd need extensive local knowledge to successfully navigate that road to reach the monument, Deputy Herrera explained. Generally, only local residents or experienced travelers use that route. However, investigators discovered that 1997 GPS systems would sometimes direct tourists through this route as a shortcut to Canyon de Chelly, without warnings about difficult terrain, weather hazards, or the remote nature that could leave travelers stranded and vulnerable. Recent snowfall had created treacherous conditions, producing thick mud that could trap vehicles. Where Nathan and Dylan's SUV was found, investigators determined the brothers became stuck when their vehicle slid into a drainage ditch. Physical evidence told a heartbreaking story of desperate escape attempts. Investigators found branches and wood pieces around the SUV, indicating the brothers tried using natural materials for tire traction. Multiple handprints on the exterior, confirmed through analysis as belonging to both Nathan and Dylan, showed they'd spent considerable time and energy trying to push their vehicle out. Their Ford Escape was so deeply mired that all efforts were hopeless. The vehicle showed no tampering or external damage beyond natural attempts to free it. It remained locked with all personal belongings undisturbed inside. Investigators concluded Nathan and Dylan eventually realized freeing their vehicle was impossible and made the fateful decision to abandon it and walk back toward Sawmill to seek help or find a working telephone. It was during this desperate walk for help that Nathan Reed and Dylan McCarthy encountered whoever ended their lives. This is where the mystery deepens in ways that have baffled investigators for 27 years. Authorities obtained security footage from Sawmill's single convenience store, the only business with surveillance equipment. They analyzed every frame, searching for clues about timing and whether anyone suspicious might have been following the brothers. The footage revealed Nathan and Dylan passed through Sawmill at approximately 3 p.m. on Saturday, March 21st, 1997. This was the last confirmed sighting of both brothers alive, captured as they purchased supplies and asked for directions. Based on when their bodies were discovered, investigators determined both men died between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. Saturday afternoon. But here's what makes this case completely baffling. The surveillance footage showed no signs of confrontation, argument, or disturbance. Nathan and Dylan appeared calm, relaxed, and completely unaware of potential danger. More significantly, there was no indication anyone was following, watching, or paying unusual attention to their presence. Deputy Herrera's team reviewed every minute of footage, looking for potential suspects. They identified one person with criminal history who appeared around the same time, but after extensive questioning, this individual failed to develop into a viable suspect. With that lead exhausted, investigators expanded their search throughout Sawmill, conducting methodical door-to-door canvassing with Navajo Nation police, who knew the local population and geography. Officers spoke with residents within 1.5 miles of where the bodies were found, hoping to find witnesses who might have seen the brothers during final hours, heard sounds of violence, or noticed anything unusual in their quiet community. The extensive canvass yielded virtually no useful information. The remote crime scene meant residents lived far apart, separated by dense forest and rough terrain that would have muffled sounds from where Nathan and Dylan were killed. FBI agent Davenport explains that violent crimes involving non-tribal members on Navajo Nation land are extremely uncommon. Most FBI work on the Navajo Nation involves crimes between tribal members, usually by someone the victim knows personally, rather than random violence against strangers. The Navajo Nation welcomes thousands of tourists during summer months, and tribal members are known for genuine hospitality and appreciation for tourism's economic benefits. To have two non-tribal members brutally murdered while traveling to visit a popular tourist destination is not just rare, it's almost unprecedented, Agent Davenport emphasizes. It's the kind of senseless crime that shakes an entire community. The apparently random nature was particularly disturbing. The person responsible could be anyone, a community member, someone passing through, or someone from a different state who encountered the brothers during their most vulnerable moment. But with limited physical evidence, no clear witnesses, and no obvious connections between victims and local area residents, investigators struggled to develop basic theories about why these innocent men were targeted. Agent Davenport's team has considered every possible scenario. We found no indication robbery was the primary motive, he explains. However, it's possible someone initially approached Nathan and Dylan intending to rob them. Then something went wrong that escalated the situation. Another theory involves Nathan and Dylan accidentally witnessing illegal activity while walking back towards Sawmill. Could they have inadvertently come across a drug transaction or other criminal enterprise? That's definitely possible, Agent Davenport acknowledges. Deputy Herrera has developed his own theory. Based on my experience in this region and considering the isolated location and brutal nature of what occurred, I believe Nathan and Dylan happened to encounter serious criminal activity already in progress, and they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Herrera's theory focuses on drug trade historically moving through remote southwest areas. My best guess is they walked into some kind of drug-related transaction, and whoever was involved decided Nathan and Dylan posed too much risk to leave alive. Victoria Hayes has spent 27 years developing her own thoughts about what her husband and brother-in-law encountered. I think Nathan and Dylan came face to face with pure evil, she says with quiet conviction. I don't know if they were randomly in the wrong place at the wrong time, but what was done to them was so terrible that it still takes my breath away. Victoria's next observation sends chills down everyone's spine who has worked this case. I don't believe whoever did this hadn't done it before, and I'm convinced they won't hesitate to do it again. You don't suddenly develop the ability to overpower and kill two healthy, strong, intelligent men. That level of violence and cold-bloodedness suggests someone with considerable experience. The investigation has continued actively for 27 years, with agencies conducting hundreds of interviews, reviewing surveillance footage, analyzing physical evidence with increasingly sophisticated technology, and pursuing every possible lead. Everything that could possibly be done has been thoroughly covered and re-examined multiple times as new technologies became available, Agent Davenport explains. What drives our investigation forward now is information from the public, people who have seen, heard, or know something that could help identify who was responsible. For investigators, every unsolved murder is deeply personal. These were human beings with families, People with hopes and dreams, Agent Davenport emphasizes. Nathan Reed and Dylan McCarthy deserve to live full lives, and they deserve justice. My agents will continue working this case until we identify the person responsible and push this investigation through to successful prosecution. Deputy Herrera feels the enormous weight of this unsolved case daily. Whoever committed these murders should not remain at liberty, especially considering the brutal nature of what happened. There's real possibility that similar violence could occur again if someone doesn't come forward. What happened was calculated, cold-blooded, and senseless. The impact on the Reed and McCarthy families has been profound and ongoing, touching every aspect of their daily lives 27 years later. Victoria Hayes continues struggling with carrying on after such unimaginable loss. My boys carry enormous grief every single day, Victoria explains with quiet strength. But they are amazing young men. They possess the same inner strength their father had. They love life with the same enthusiasm Nathan brought to everything, and they work hard just like their father taught them. But it's still incredibly difficult, and it's something we continue working through every day. Victoria had spent every day with Nathan for over 20 years of marriage, except for a few brief business trips. I cannot accept that Nathan won't be here to grow old with me, regardless of where we might have lived or what paths our lives might have taken, Victoria says, her voice filled with pain that never fully heals. He won't be here to see his sons graduate, watch them grow into the men I know they can become, to show them how to become the kind of amazing husbands and fathers he was. Someone deliberately destroyed all of that. Victoria's message to anyone who might possess information is deeply personal and filled with raw emotion from nearly 3 decades of unanswered questions. If you know something, anything at all, please share it with investigators, because every single day I think about my husband and brother-in-law. Every single day without exception. Our lives have these 2 enormous, unfillable holes, and whoever did this destroyed everything we spent years building for ourselves and our children. The most haunting aspect for families is terrible uncertainty about what Nathan and Dylan experienced during their final moments. I don't know what happened to my husband and his brother during their last moments, Victoria says, her voice breaking. Nathan's mother carries that uncertainty every day, and it's slowly crushing her spirit. Victoria's plea to anyone with information is simple but heartbreaking. Please think about Nathan's mother, who lost her son so terribly. Think about my 5 boys who lost their father when they were children. Please give us the answers we've been seeking for 27 years. The FBI continues offering a substantial reward for information leading to arrest and conviction in Nathan Reed and Dylan McCarthy's murders. Even the smallest piece of information could be the crucial key that finally solves this 27-year-old mystery. But here's what makes this case even more disturbing. Investigators believe Nathan and Dylan's murders weren't an isolated incident committed by someone who acted once and disappeared forever. The level of violence, the remote location chosen, the apparent absence of robbery as primary motive, and the methodical way the murders were carried out strongly suggest whoever was responsible had considerable experience with this type of brutal violence. Criminal profilers believe the perpetrator's behavior patterns indicate someone who had likely committed similar crimes before and would be willing to do so again. Since Nathan and Dylan were killed, several other unsolved cases throughout the American Southwest have shared troubling similarities that have caught federal investigators' attention. These cases involve travelers who took remote routes through sparsely populated areas, became stranded due to vehicle problems or navigation errors, then disappeared under mysterious circumstances never fully explained. While investigators cannot definitively link these cases to Nathan and Dylan's murders, the patterns are disturbing enough that federal authorities have been quietly reviewing cold cases across Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and Nevada, searching for connections and similarities that might have been missed during original investigations. The concern among law enforcement is that Nathan and Dylan were not this person's first victims, and they were almost certainly not the last. This possibility adds tremendous urgency to the ongoing investigation, because if the person responsible is still alive and active, additional families may be suffering the same devastating loss that tore apart the Reed and McCarthy families. The geographic pattern suggests someone who possesses intimate knowledge of remote Southwest areas, someone who understands exactly how to use isolation and harsh terrain to their advantage when targeting vulnerable travelers. This person knows that in these remote locations, visitors can disappear without trace, and evidence can be scattered or destroyed by weather and wildlife long before law enforcement discovers it. The terrifying question haunting investigators is whether Nathan and Dylan were simply unfortunate enough to encounter this dangerous individual through random chance, or whether they were specifically targeted and stalked for reasons that remain unknown. Either possibility is deeply frightening and has different implications for public safety throughout the Southwest. Victoria Hayes has developed her own theory based on intimate knowledge of her husband's character. I believe whoever did this was watching Nathan and Dylan long before they realized they were in danger, Victoria says with conviction. I think this person followed them from the gas station in Sawmill, or possibly from earlier stops. I think they waited patiently until Nathan and Dylan were completely isolated and vulnerable, then struck with deliberate precision. Victoria's theory is based on deep understanding of Nathan's personality and capabilities. Nathan was careful, intelligent, and physically strong. Dylan was young, athletic, and alert. For someone to overpower both simultaneously, they would have needed significant advantages, probably weapons, surprise, or both. The fact that neither Nathan nor Dylan could escape, fight back effectively, or call for help strongly suggests whoever attacked them was well prepared and had planned their assault carefully in advance. This level of preparation points towards someone with considerable experience in committing violent crimes, which brings us back to the terrifying possibility that Nathan and Dylan were not this person's only victims. As we approach the 27th anniversary of this unsolved crime, the investigation remains active and ongoing, but investigators desperately need assistance from public members who might possess crucial information. Somewhere in America, someone knows something that could finally bring justice to Nathan Reed and Dylan McCarthy and provide their families with answers they've sought for nearly 3 decades. Maybe you remember seeing something suspicious in the Sawmill area during March of 1997 that didn't seem important then, but now takes on new significance. Maybe you heard someone talking about being in that remote region around when Nathan and Dylan were killed. Maybe you know someone whose behavior changed dramatically after March 21st, 1997. Someone who seemed different, more secretive, or more paranoid than before. Maybe you've heard someone make comments about this case over years that seemed to demonstrate inside knowledge or information that wasn't publicly available. Maybe you know someone who has unusual familiarity with that extremely remote Arizona area. Someone who knows those back roads and isolated locations better than most people would have reason to. Or maybe you are someone who has been carrying the weight of this terrible secret for 27 years, and you're finally ready to do the right thing and help bring closure to 2 families who have suffered far too long. Nathan and Dylan's families deserve answers after nearly 3 decades of uncertainty and pain. They deserve to finally know what happened to their loved ones during those final, terrifying hours. They deserve to see justice served for 2 innocent men who died simply because they took a wrong turn and encountered pure evil. But beyond the family's needs, there's an even more urgent consideration. If investigators are correct that this crime was part of a larger pattern of violence, then solving Nathan and Dylan's case could prevent future tragedies. It could save other families from experiencing the devastating loss that Victoria Hayes and her sons have lived with for 27 years. It could prevent other parents from having to explain that daddy isn't coming home from what should have been a simple trip. It could spare other families from spending decades wondering what happened to their loved ones during final moments on Earth. So if you know anything at all about what happened to Nathan Reed and Dylan McCarthy on March 21st, 1997, please reach out to the Federal Bureau of Investigation immediately. Your tip can be completely anonymous. Your information, no matter how small or insignificant it might seem, could be the missing piece investigators have been searching for all these years. Don't let another year pass without taking action. Don't let another family suffer the way the Reed and McCarthy families have suffered. Don't let whoever is responsible continue walking free while Nathan and Dylan's families continue living with unanswered questions and unresolved grief. Someone out there knows the truth about what happened on that remote Arizona road in 1997, and that person has the power to finally bring justice to 2 families who have waited far too long for answers. The question is not whether this case can be solved, it's whether the person who holds the key will finally find courage to speak up and do what's right. The families are still waiting for answers after 27 years. Investigators are still pursuing every possible lead and following every potential clue. And somewhere in America, the person responsible for these murders is still walking free, possibly planning additional acts of violence against other innocent travelers. How much longer will this continue? How many more years will pass before justice is finally served? How many more families might suffer similar tragedies if this case remains unsolved? That depends entirely on someone who knows something about this crime finally deciding to step forward and share what they know with law enforcement. The clock has been ticking for 27 years, marking each day that has passed without resolution, without answers, and without justice for Nathan Reed and Dylan McCarthy. But it's not too late to make this right. It's not too late to give two grieving families the closure they desperately need. It's not too late to ensure that whoever committed these brutal murders finally faces the consequences of their actions. Nathan Reed was a loving husband and devoted father simply trying to help his younger brother start a new life in California. Dylan McCarthy was a young man full of hope and excitement about his future, someone loyal to a fault who would help anyone in need. Neither deserved what happened to them on that remote Arizona road. Neither deserved to die in such a violent, senseless way. They deserved to live full, happy lives surrounded by people who love them. They deserved to see their dreams come true and their plans come to fruition. They deserved to grow old and watch their families grow and prosper. Someone deliberately took all of that away from them and from their families for reasons that may never make sense to rational people. But even though we may never understand the motive behind these murders, we can still ensure justice is served. We can still make sure Nathan and Dylan's deaths were not completely meaningless. We can still give their families the answers they need to finally find some measure of peace. The story of Nathan Reed and Dylan McCarthy is a reminder that evil can strike anywhere, anytime, even in the most beautiful places on earth. It's a reminder that danger can lurk in remote locations where travelers are most vulnerable and least able to protect themselves or call for help. But it's also a reminder that justice, even when delayed for decades, can still be achieved. It's a reminder that truth, no matter how deeply buried or carefully hidden, has a way of eventually coming to light. It's a reminder that there are still people who care enough about right and wrong to keep fighting for victims even when everyone else has given up hope. The investigation continues today with the same dedication that has driven it for 27 years. New technologies are being applied to old evidence. New investigators are bringing fresh perspectives to old theories. New witnesses are coming forward with information that might have seemed irrelevant years ago, but could be crucial today. The search for answers continues. The pursuit of justice continues. And the hope that this case will finally be solved continues to burn brightly in the hearts of everyone who knew Nathan and Dylan, everyone who has worked on their case, and everyone who believes that no murder should go unsolved forever. 27 years later, someone still knows the truth about what happened on that remote Arizona road. 27 years later, the evidence still exists that could solve this case. 27 years later, it's still not too late to do the right thing. The question is, when will justice finally be served? When will the families finally get their answers? When will the person responsible finally be held accountable for destroying so many lives? That depends on you. If you know something, anything at all about this case, please contact the FBI today. Your information could be the key that finally unlocks this 27-year-old mystery and brings peace to two families who have suffered in silence for far too long, because Nathan Reed and Dylan McCarthy deserve justice. Their families deserve answers, and the American people deserve to know that even the most remote roads in our beautiful country are safe for travelers who are simply trying to explore the natural wonders that this nation has to offer. The truth is still out there, waiting to be discovered. Justice is still possible, waiting to be served. And somewhere, someone is waiting to finally do the right thing and help solve one of the Southwest's most baffling and heartbreaking unsolved mysteries. The case of Nathan Reed and Dylan McCarthy remains one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries in American law enforcement. After 27 years, their families still wait for justice, and investigators still believe the person responsible walks among us. But here's what I find most disturbing about this case: the sheer number of unanswered questions that point to something far more sinister than a random encounter. Consider this. Nathan was an experienced traveler who never deviated from his communication routine. Dylan was young and alert. Both were physically capable men, yet somehow, both were overpowered in broad daylight on a road where someone could have potentially seen or heard something. The timing troubles me deeply. They passed through Sawmill at 3 p.m., appearing completely normal on security footage. By 6 p.m., both were dead. That's a 3-hour window where everything went catastrophically wrong. But what happened during those 3 hours that investigators still can't explain? Here's my theory based on 27 years of evidence in behavioral analysis. I believe Nathan and Dylan encountered someone who was already engaged in criminal activity in that remote area. This wasn't a random predator waiting for victims. This was someone using the isolation of Navajo Route 7 for illegal purposes, possibly drug trafficking or weapons dealing, who couldn't afford to let witnesses walk away. The methodical nature of how the bodies were positioned, the fact that robbery clearly wasn't the motive, and the complete absence of any struggle near their abandoned vehicle tells me whoever did this had experience. This person knew exactly how to control two grown men, which suggests either multiple perpetrators or someone with significant tactical knowledge. But here's what keeps me awake at night thinking about this case: the GPS factor. In 1997, consumer GPS was relatively new technology. Most people still relied on paper maps. Yet Nathan and Dylan had two GPS devices, and somehow still ended up on a remote dirt road that locals say only experienced travelers would choose. Was their GPS deliberately tampered with? Did someone redirect them to that isolated location? Consider this possibility. What if Nathan and Dylan were specifically targeted before they ever reached Arizona? Think about their route, their stops, their predictable travel pattern. Someone could have been tracking their progress, maybe even following at a distance, waiting for the perfect opportunity when they would be most vulnerable. The surveillance footage from Sawmill shows no signs of anyone suspicious. But remember, we're only seeing one camera angle from one business. What about the rest of the town? What about the areas they passed through before reaching Sawmill? In 1997, security cameras were far less common, which means there are massive gaps in the timeline that could hide crucial evidence. Here's another theory that law enforcement has quietly considered but never publicly discussed in detail. The drug trafficking angle makes sense, but what if it wasn't just a chance encounter? What if Nathan and Dylan stumbled upon a major distribution hub that was using the remote Navajo Nation territory specifically because of its jurisdictional complexities? Think about the logistics. Drugs moving from Mexico through Arizona would need staging areas, places where shipments could be broken down and redistributed. The remote areas around Canyon de Chelly would be perfect for such operations: isolated, difficult to access, and requiring multiple law enforcement agencies to coordinate any response. If Nathan and Dylan walked into the middle of such an operation, the people involved would have had no choice but to eliminate them. These wouldn't be street-level dealers. These would be professional criminals with experience in violence and sophisticated enough to operate across tribal land boundaries. But there's one aspect of this case that suggests something even more disturbing. Victoria's intuition about her husband being in danger started at exactly 8:30 p.m. on Saturday, roughly 2.5 hours after Nathan and Dylan were likely already dead. How do we explain that kind of supernatural connection? Some might dismiss it as coincidence, but those of us who study these cases know that family members often have unexplained knowledge about traumatic events involving their loved ones. What truly haunts me is the possibility that this wasn't Nathan and Dylan's killer's first time, and it certainly wasn't their last. The FBI's quiet review of similar cases across the Southwest suggests a pattern that authorities don't want to discuss publicly yet. How many other travelers have taken wrong turns down remote roads and simply vanished? How many families are still waiting for answers about loved ones who disappeared while exploring America's most beautiful and isolated places? The geographic clustering of similar unsolved cases around remote camping areas, national monuments, and isolated scenic routes suggests someone who specifically targets tourists and travelers. Someone who understands that people visiting these areas often tell family and friends they're going off the grid for a few days, which provides perfect cover for crimes that might not be reported for 48 to 72 hours. Here's what I believe happened based on all available evidence. Nathan and Dylan were specifically chosen as targets, possibly even before they reached Arizona. Their killer or killers had experience with this type of crime and knew exactly how to use the remote location and jurisdictional complexities to their advantage. The fact that the bodies were found relatively quickly suggests the perpetrator wanted them discovered, perhaps as a warning to others who might stumble upon illegal activities in the area. The most chilling possibility is that we're dealing with someone who has refined their methods over decades, possibly claiming dozens of victims across the American Southwest. Someone who understands law enforcement procedures, jurisdictional boundaries, and how to exploit the communication dead zones that still exist in remote areas. What do you think happened to Nathan and Dylan on that remote Arizona road? Do you believe this was truly random, or do you see the same patterns I've identified that suggest something far more calculated and sinister? Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation while traveling through remote areas, where your GPS led you down roads that seemed to get more isolated by the mile? Have you ever had that gut feeling that something wasn't right, that you needed to turn around immediately? If this case has affected you the way it's affected me, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. We cover the most compelling unsolved mysteries and cold cases that deserve to stay in the public eye until justice is finally served. These families need our voices to keep their stories alive. In the comments below, I want to hear your theories about what might have happened. Do you think someone was specifically hunting travelers in that area? Could this be connected to organized crime using tribal land for illegal operations? Do you believe Nathan and Dylan accidentally witnessed something that signed their death warrant? Or were they deliberately lured to that location? More importantly, if you have any information about this case, no matter how insignificant it might seem, please don't hesitate to contact the FBI. Maybe you remember seeing suspicious activity in the area during March 1997. Maybe you heard someone talking about being in that region around the time of the murders. Maybe you know someone whose behavior changed dramatically after that date. Share this video with anyone who might have traveled through Arizona in the late 1990s, or anyone who loves true crime and unsolved mysteries. The more people who know about Nathan and Dylan's story, the better chance we have of finally getting answers for Victoria and her sons, who have waited 27 years for justice. What other unsolved cases would you like to see covered on this channel? Are there disappearances in remote areas that have always troubled you? Leave your suggestions in the comments and let me know which mysteries keep you wondering what really happened to people who were simply trying to explore the natural beauty of our country. The Nathan Reed and Dylan McCarthy case proves that evil can be hiding in the most unexpected places, waiting for innocent people who are just trying to live their lives and pursue their dreams. Their story serves as a reminder that we must never stop fighting for justice, no matter how much time has passed. Thank you for watching, and remember, someone out there knows the truth about what happened on that remote Arizona road in March 1997. The question is whether they'll finally find the courage to speak up and help bring closure to a family that has suffered in silence for nearly 3 decades. Until next time, stay safe out there, trust your instincts, and never stop asking questions about cases that deserve answers.